If the American-backed deal does collapse, as some European diplomats are already suggesting, it would deliver another critical blow to Barack Obama's policy of engagement. And there's no doubt that the voices calling for international sanctions and Israeli military action will grow louder. To discuss this, I'm joined by Nathan Gonzalez, an Iran policy analyst, author and journalist who's in Los Angeles, and Mike Singh, a former Bush administration official in Boston. Mr. Gonzalez, if I can begin with you. I wonder whether this is all part of the problem. The IAEA says Iran's given an initial response. Already, we have European diplomats saying it's unacceptable with so much at stake. Do you think that's helpful?
No, I think in general it's not. I think a lot of people are looking at this as if it were a sprint, but it's really a long-term commitment toward bringing Iran into a cooperative relationship with the West in general. And I think the attitude has to be one of this is going to be a long-haul approach.
Mike Singh, don't you think that's part of the problem? The entire framing of this issue is always Iran is being deceptive, it's vacillating and so on for a reason. The EU and the US are bending over backwards. Once again, they're out their own tricks again. It's not very helpful to actually getting a proper diplomatic solution, is it?
Well, I have to say that this is not a new conflict between Iran and its neighbors in the Western countries. It's been going on for 30 years or more. So I would say that, if you look at this deal, for example, it was worked out in Vienna between delegates of both sides. The other delegates, including the Americans, French, Russians, and so forth, accepted it right away without changes. And it's Iran that's really calling for a massive rewriting of the deal, so I don't think it's unfair to criticize the Iranian response.
Is that completely correct? Surely the first deal from Iran was that they would buy fuel from outside. Then it's actually the international community that said, okay, no, you can't buy fuel, but you can reprocess it in Russia and France. And then Iran said, okay, we'll think about that. It's not quite as clear-cut as you suggest.
The initial deal was worked out in Vienna with Iranian representatives there. Their ambassador to the IAEA, a man named Sultania, was the delegate that they had sent. He's quite high-ranking. When he sent it back to Tehran, obviously the response came back no. Frankly, I would see this not so much as an honest response, but one that's intended to split Russia, France, the US, and UK, and to cause internal squabbles amongst them.
Nathan Gonzalez, Iran up to its cynical tricks again.
Well, I wouldn't put it that way. I think Iran has an interest in developing some kind of deterrent capability. As we saw, the United States invaded both of its neighbors, Afghanistan and Iraq, and then sort of turned its sights toward some overt and some implied threats to the Islamic Republic. I think what we have to remember in all of this whole discussion is that Iran is a country with interests. The nuclear program began under the Shah, the pro-American Shah, late 60s, early 70s. And so we have to really keep in mind that when we are discussing weapons of mass destruction and all of these unconventional issues, we really have to keep our eye on the ball, which is the intentions and the interests of the countries, and deal with those instead of being obsessed over one particular capability or enrichment cycle or anything like that.
Mike Singh, there's also the point that Iran did once make a deal with the French to get reactor fuel, and the French reneged in the 70s, and so there's a bit of suspicion about French involvement.
Well, I think that the French reneged when there was a revolution in Iran, so circumstances changed quite a bit.
But they're also terribly bellicose now, and they've reneged in the past. The language coming out of Paris is hardly amounts to a great deal of trust building. So we understand what's on the table now, perhaps, is the Iranians saying, look, let's give the low-enriched uranium to Russia and France in installments, and when we get the fuel rods back, we'll give another bunch of low-enriched uranium back. What's wrong with that?
I think what's wrong with it's Iran saying, let us keep what you had hoped to take, and also take what you had promised to give. So it's sort of, let's have our cake and eat it too. I think if any of us were in a negotiation, we probably wouldn't be so happy with such a response.
But no promises are being made. As you say, it's a negotiation. Why in a negotiation is there immediately a sense that Iran is being cynical and up to its old tricks? Don't we need an entirely new framework? Or are we just simply, is the Obama administration just pretending to have an outstretched hand with the same old axis of evil rhetoric underlying it?
No, I don't think that's right. I think that if there's one thing we can be sure of, it's that President Obama is genuine in his desire for engagement. But look, I think this is a test of whether that engagement is going to succeed. I think if Iran comes back with a response that they know is not acceptable to the P5+1, it suggests that they're simply not in the mood for a real compromise here. There's very little reason for them to reject the deal that's been proposed to them if they truly have peaceful intent for their nuclear program.
Nathan Gonzalez, you're clearly calling, though, for a more, I don't know, three-dimensional view of Iran and its concerns. It really doesn't seem to be having, I mean, that approach doesn't seem to be getting much of a hearing in this town, in Washington at least.
No, I think here in the United States, we have this approach toward the Middle East of friends and enemies. The realities on the ground are much more complicated. They have to do with interests. They have to do with balance of power. The reality is we disrupted the balance of power that existed when Saddam Hussein was in power. And we basically handed much of the region over to the Iranian state. And we said, we're going to put your friends in power in Iraq, the sort of Shia groups that came to power. We're going to put a friendly regime in Afghanistan. But at the same time, the country that we need to achieve stability in these two countries, because we've committed hundreds of thousands of troops to the mission of stability in those two countries, to uphold these pro-Iranian / pro-American states. And the fact that we are even talking about containing or pressuring Iran, we need their active help. And this nuclear issue really does not need to be at the top of the agenda. And
Mike
that's what
Singh?
Washington needs to start.
Mike Singh, briefly, does that convince you?
I have to say that asking Iran to help you to ensure stability in the Middle East is like asking the wolf to guard your sheep. You know, Iran certainly has interests, and I don't think that anyone disagrees with that view, but Iran's interests in this case conflict with our own. I think Iran is interested in hegemony rather in the region, is interested in having a nuclear weapon for that purpose. That certainly is at odds with our own interests, and it's up to us to increase the costs for them and make them reevaluate their interests.
Oh, well,
No, I think.
I guess we didn't
Sorry.
manage to bring you two together, and we are running out of satellite time, so we'll try again another